Our Learjet just crashed.
On the afternoon of May 15, 2017, a Learjet 35A, on a positioning flight from Philadelphia to Teterboro, New Jersey, crashed in an industrial area just south of Teterboro Airport.
Airport's closed. Airport's closed.
The Learjet, November 452 Delta Alpha, had been on the ILS runway 6 approach, with instructions to circle to land on runway 1, but it crashed here, half a mile south of the approach end of runway 1. Both pilots were killed. No one else was on board. As part of its investigation, the NTSB released disturbing audio transcripts from the cockpit voice recorder in the Learjet. The transcripts revealed dysfunctional cockpit operations between a task-saturated captain and an inexperienced first officer, flying a demanding airplane in one of the most intense airspace regions in the world. This was the crew's third flight of the day. The Learjet's captain filed an IFR flight plan for a 28-minute flight from Philadelphia International Airport to Teterboro at a cruising altitude of flight level 270 and a cruise speed of 441 knots. The Learjet, operated by a charter company, was flying under FAR Part 91 as a positioning flight with no passengers aboard. The Lear was cleared for takeoff shortly after 3 p.m. Visual meteorological conditions prevailed along the route of flight, but surface winds at the destination were strong and gusty. The 53-year-old captain was ATP rated, with 6,900 hours total time. He had 353 hours as PIC in the Learjet. He had flown right seat in the Beechjet 400 and Mitsubishi MU-300 for his previous employer, before being hired to fly as PIC by the company that operated the Learjet. The captain had successfully completed a proficiency check 2 months prior to the accident, but earlier records indicate that in July of the previous year, he had been deemed not yet proficient in a number of maneuvers during a series of simulator training sessions. One of these maneuvers was the circling approach. In post-accident interviews with the captain's former colleagues, he was described as not proactive with checklists, and ineffective in his role as pilot monitoring. One colleague from his previous employer stated that he felt the accident pilot was not ready to be a PIC. The second in command was 33 years old and held a commercial pilot certificate with 1,170 hours total time. He was type-rated in the Learjet with second-in-command privileges only, and had accumulated 407 hours as an SIC. The right-seat pilot had some difficulties throughout his flying career, initially failing his private pilot check ride twice. During a simulator session 8 months before the accident, the instructor noted an unusual number of faults, including crashing on the first takeoff, inability to control speed and altitude during the stall series, flying inverted on the unusual attitude module, and crashing on landing during an ILS approach. A colleague from the SIC's previous employer described his performance as hit or miss, and another colleague said he was prone to errors. The co-pilot had been rated 0 on the company rating scale of 0 through 4, which meant that he could only perform pilot monitoring duties. This rating prevented him from flying the airplane under any circumstances, but the captain disregarded this rule and allowed the SIC to fly the leg to Teterboro, coaching him on airplane control throughout the flight. The straight-line distance from Philadelphia to Teterboro is about 80 nautical miles. The Learjet departed Philadelphia at 3:04 p.m., with an estimated time en route of 28 minutes. Shortly after takeoff, the Learjet was cleared direct to the waypoint Maisie, making a slightly shorter route than what was filed, but the airplane was capped at an altitude of 4,000 feet MSL. At 3:09 p.m., the crew was given temporary vectors away from their route for traffic sequencing.
November 452 Delta Alpha, turn left heading 360. It's a vector for sequence. I'll have you back direct Maisie in a few more moments.
Okay, 360 on the heading for 25 Bravo, or 2 Delta Alpha.
In the cockpit, The crew expressed annoyance at their altitude and heading assignment. Meanwhile, the crew had exceeded the airspeed limitation of 250 knots below 10,000 feet. It would be one of many airspeed violations during the course of the flight.
November 452 Delta Alpha, what's your airspeed?
We're showing right now at 260, 452 Delta Alpha.
The dialogue continued, indicating a complacent attitude from the pilots.
November 452 Delta Alpha, turn right direct Maisie.
Okay, right turn direct Maisie, 452 Delta Alpha.
The captain requested a higher altitude a couple of minutes later.
452 Delta Alpha, any chance we can get higher?
452 Delta Alpha, unable higher. I would have to spin you back around and sequence you with the rest of the traffic going into Teterboro.
452 Delta Alpha.
About 10 minutes into the flight, the crew checked in with New York approach. The approach controller provided vectors for the Teterboro ILS runway 6 approach, circle to land on runway 1.
Clear 452 Delta Alpha, New York approach, Newark altimeter 2975, flighting 020, vector ILS 6, circle 1.
Okay, we got 299 what was that again? Say that again for 452 Delta Alpha.
The altimeter is 2975 at Newark. Clear 2 Delta Alpha, flighting 020, vector ILS 6, circle 1.
Okay, 020, 452 Delta Alpha.
The captain seemed confused and annoyed by the instructions, and commented to the SIC, saying that they were hundreds of miles away from Teterboro, when in fact they were only 48 nautical miles away. Less than a minute later, the controller instructed the Learjet to descend to 3,000 feet, and the captain seemed to finally establish a correct mental picture of Teterboro's location.
Teterboro Airport ATIS information blue.
The Learjet crew tuned into the ATIS frequency, but the captain did not pay attention to the entire transmission. Shortly afterward, the controller gave instructions to intercept the localizer for runway 6.
Clear 2 Delta Alpha, flighting 090, intercept the 6 localizer, contact New York approach 127.6.
Okay, 127.6, fly heading 090 to intercept the 6 and the Teterboro, 452 Delta Alpha.
While attempting to join the localizer, the SIC mistook the Newark International Airport for Teterboro and told the captain that he had the runway in sight. The Learjet flew through the localizer course, and a short time later the controller spoke up.
Learjet 2 Delta Alpha, make sure you intercept the localizer.
452 Delta Alpha, copy.
The crew corrected their course and made a left turn to intercept the localizer, then headed toward the waypoint Vings per instruction from the controller.
Learjet 2 Delta Alpha, can you go to Vings? Can you do that? Vings, intercept localizer 6.
452 Delta Alpha, copy.
While the Learjet was inbound to Vings, the SIC tried to transfer the controls to the captain, but the captain didn't respond. The SIC continued to fly the approach. The Teterboro Airport is located near Newark, JFK, and LaGuardia airports. When the wind is from the north or northwest, to avoid conflicts with those airports, aircraft landing at Teterboro are often vectored to approach from the west, using the runway 6 localizer, then instructed to circle to land to the north on runway 1. The term circle to land doesn't imply an actual circle. In this case, the circling maneuver would consist of a right turn, followed by a left turn onto the extended center line of runway 1. The winds at Teterboro were from the northwest at 16 to 20 knots, gusting to 32 knots. The approach controller cleared November 452 Delta Alpha for the approach about 8 miles out from Vings.
Learjet 452 Delta Alpha is 8 miles from Vings, cross Vings at 2,000 feet, clear ILS runway 6, circle runway 1.
Okay, cleared ILS 6, circle 1, Vings 2000, 452 Delta Alpha.
The pilots did not conduct an approach briefing at this point, which was against company policy. Instead, the captain continued to coach the co-pilot through the speed and altitude requirements for the approach. At 3:26 p.m., the approach controller instructed the crew to do 3 things: contact Teterboro Tower, cross the next waypoint Dandy at 1,500 feet, and circle at Torby, which was the final approach fix, located 3.8 miles from runway 6.
Learjet 2 Delta Alpha, contact Teterboro Tower 1.5. She crossed Dandy, 1,500 feet, circle at Torby.
All right, Dandy, 200 feet, circle at Torby, 925, 452 Delta Alpha.
Dandy at 1,500 feet, 2 Delta Alpha.
2015, 452 Delta Alpha.
The flight crew acknowledged these instructions, but neglected to do all three. The captain had become so preoccupied with talking the co-pilot through the approach that he had lost situational awareness. The crew did not contact the tower. They crossed Dandy at 2,000 feet, and they did not begin the circling approach at Torby. About 2 minutes later, and approximately 4 miles from the airport, approach again instructed the Learjet crew to contact the tower.
Learjet 2 Delta Alpha, contact Teterboro Tower 19.5.
19.5, 452 Delta Alpha.
But the captain continued to coach the SIC, instructing him to descend to the circling minimum of 760 feet.
452 Delta Alpha, Teterboro Tower.
Yeah, we're up for the circling 2 Delta Alpha.
With contact established, Teterboro Tower cleared the Learjet to land on runway 1.
Roger, Lear 452 Delta Alpha, wind 36016, gust 32, runway 1, continue traffic holding position.
452 Delta Alpha.
Lear 2 Delta Alpha, runway 1, clear to land, safe parking.
Yeah, we're going to be at Jet Aviation, 452 Delta Alpha, clear to land 1.
When the Learjet was about 1 nautical mile from the approach end of runway 6, the tower asked,
Delta Alpha, you can start that turn?
Yes, sir, we're doing it right now, 452 Delta Alpha.
The Learjet banked hard to the right. A tower controller later recalled he could see the Learjet's belly, with the wings almost perpendicular to the ground. While the airplane was in the right turn, the SIC, sounding stressed, turned over the controls to the captain. The captain took the controls and directed the SIC to watch the airspeed and began a high bank left turn to runway 1. During the turn, the SIC called airspeed 4 times. The captain called out stall, and the SIC agreed and repeated airspeed twice more.
It's departure Teterboro. Gotham 832, go around.
T.
The guy just went in the ground.
Security video cameras at nearby buildings captured the last moments, showing the Learjet at a steep nose-down attitude. One camera captured the jet in a right bank angle of about 125 degrees as it crashed in an industrial area just south of the airport. In its final report, the NTSB found the probable cause to be the pilot in command's attempt to salvage an unstabilized visual approach, which resulted in an aerodynamic stall at low altitude. The NTSB concluded that the PIC's focus on the visual maneuver of aligning the airplane with the landing runway distracted him from multiple indications of decreasing stall margin. Despite the SIC's callouts, the captain did not add power or lower the airplane's nose to reduce angle of attack during the left turn. Likely stressed and overwhelmed, the captain may have unintentionally tuned out these calls from the SIC. Contributing to the accident was the PIC's decision to allow an unapproved second-in-command to act as pilot flying, the PIC's inadequate and incomplete pre-flight planning, and the flight crew's lack of an approach briefing. Of those contributing factors, perhaps the most causal to the accident was the captain's decision to allow the unqualified second-in-command to fly. For most of the flight, the captain instructed the SIC in flying the airplane, including flight basics such as altitude and airspeed. The SIC's performance required frequent coaching from the captain, which appeared to distract him and degrade his situational awareness and performance of pilot monitoring tasks. Consequently, the crew exceeded airspeed limitations multiple times throughout the flight and missed numerous radio calls. The captain's decision to allow the SIC to act as pilot flying placed both pilots in roles they did not routinely perform. With this disruption in the normal division of pilot flying and pilot monitoring duties, there was a confusion in responsibilities, and neither pilot was able to consistently meet the requirements of their roles. Checklists were missed, and the cockpit voice recorder indicated no pre-takeoff briefing, no clear description of the duties each would assume during the flight and upon arrival, and no approach briefing. These are compulsory in professional flying environments. If the flight crew had reviewed the available instrument approach procedures at Teterboro before the flight, the PIC would have known that there were no instrument approaches to runway 1 and could have anticipated a circling approach. Because they did not perform an approach briefing, the pilots had to figure out the approach as they flew it, which increased their workload and led to errors. For example, when they visually aligned with the wrong airport, they also didn't detect that their navigation equipment wasn't tuned to the Teterboro VOR, and they failed to set up the FMS before descent, which led to confusion about the approach waypoints and glide slope. After the controller instructed the crew to circle at Torby, the pilots seemed confused about the airplane's position on the approach, failed to identify Torby, and continued well past the point at which they were supposed to begin the circle-to-land maneuver. The NTSB's final contributing causes to the accident were the charter company's lack of safety programs that would have enabled the company to identify and correct patterns of poor performance and procedural noncompliance, and the FAA's ineffective safety assurance system procedures, which failed to identify these company oversight deficiencies. Even though the company had procedures and policies in place to provide safeguards that could have helped the crew retain situational awareness, the atmosphere in the cockpit was one of nonchalance. It's likely this attitude was fortified by the nature of the flight, a repositioning run, third flight of the day, and without passengers. It must have felt like a relaxed mission compared to their 2 previous flights that day. The cockpit conversation hints at a contemptuous atmosphere, disrespectful of outside authority, and dismissive of rules. As GA pilots, we can reflect on this accident and the lessons it provides to better understand the importance of a focused cockpit, how quickly situational awareness can erode, and the dangerous consequences when it does. It also reinforces the importance of surrounding ourselves with a strong safety culture that can help us manage risks, guide our decisions, and provide means of accountability. Such reflection may help us identify unwelcome traits that could spill over into our flying, traits that we must squash quickly so we can provide a safe flight environment for our crew, our passengers, and ourselves.